What up YouTube? It's Luca, back with another feature-length video on an Ark map. The first and last time I did a video like this was 1.5 years ago, when I reviewed Genesis Part 2, a little after it came out. That video took a lot out of me, so I hope that experience has made me a little more proficient when it comes to this kind of thing. This video was supposed to be made last year, but I eventually scrapped the idea due to a bunch of technical issues at the time. But now I'm revisiting it, and today I'm going to talk about Ark's first ever game-changing DLC, the desert map, Scorched Earth. A map that is very dear to me, as it is to this day still my favorite Ark DLC map. Originally, I was going to make a summary on the map, briefly going over all the new creatures and lore, while only briefly talking about its development side. But while writing the script, I found more information on Scorched Earth's early controversies than I could have imagined, which caused me to slightly alter the structure and the point of this video. So without further ado, this is the eventful history of Ark Scorched Earth. Scorched Earth was announced around the beginning of September 2016 and was released on PC and Xbox very soon after it was announced. This expansion map would cost $19.99 on top of requiring the base game, which cost $29.99 on its own. This means that during this time you had to pay $50 for the island, the center and Scorched Earth, which were the only free maps in the game at the time. $50 was considered a hefty price for the free maps, two of which were not really that distinguishable in terms of content and creatures. Another thing I stumbled upon was that there was apparently a lawsuit filed earlier that year, costing Wildcard around $40 million, which might have caused the price of the DLC to be increased to make up for that loss. Objectively, the development of Scorched Earth wasn't anything special. The map was a little bit of a side project, with Wildcard stating that the expansion was created while the studio was also busy finishing up the main game in preparation for its full release later that year. Releasing Scorched Earth while the base game itself wasn't out of early access yet was also unprecedented territory at the time. Aside from the occasional patches, there have been almost no major changes to the map since its release. The only update the map received was with the addition of a new creature, the Phoenix, along with balancing some small issues. This is very much intentional, as was confirmed by Wildcard in a live stream. They said that the DLC was, quote, meant to be released as a finished product, end quote, and so the map has remained relatively unchanged until very recently. The idea that Wildcard had developed a paid DLC expansion for a game that was still in its early access, and for a hefty price to boot, did not sit right with a lot of fans. Many players felt like they were getting cheated, because they thought Wildcard had prioritized siphoning money out of the player base through DLC, instead of making an effort to optimize and update the main game. Even though Wildcard clearly stated that Scorched Earth was developed as a side project while working on the main game, it's hard to blame the players for feeling this way. After all, spending money on a game in its early access means taking a risk and supporting a project that may never be finished. Many fans were angry that Wildcard was asking for even more money through an extension while the base game was still unoptimized and not fully released. Some players also stated that the developing and release of DLC went against the purpose of a game being in its early access phase. Needless to say, prior to release, Scorched Earth had attained more haters than enthusiasts. During this time, Steam reviews for the game dropped from mostly positive to mostly negative, with fans expressing their distaste for Wildcard's practices. Of course, this was not a good look, so Wildcard immediately stepped in to try and cater to the fans as best as possible. The price of the base game was cut by 40%, and the community manager at the time released an official message addressing the community in an attempt to clear things up. The message boiled down to Wildcard stating expansion DLCs and transferring between different maps were always planned to be a vital part of the game. This was the primary reason why they wanted to implement at least one of these expansions before the game fully released, because starting with Scorched Earth would give them the experience to create more and better expansions after the game launched. This, however, wasn't quite enough to satisfy many fans in the lead up to Scorched Earth's release shortly thereafter. However, after the DLC was released, public opinion started to shift. Many players found that Scorched Earth packed a mountain of new content given its price, and there seemed to be a lot of genuine effort behind the design of new creatures, environments and assets. People that had played the expansion quickly voiced their opinion. They loved the new map, and there was so much to do. Coming back to the comment section under the original Scorched Earth trailer, there is almost nothing but praising words from people who first got their hands on it. While Scorched Earth was initially met with controversy, the fact that it was a well-designed expansion that was actually worth the money ultimately won people over. Nowadays, Ark players have a lot of respect for the map as the one who kicked off the continuous Ark storyline, spanning various other successful DLC expansions. However, even after Scorched Earth's unexpectedly successful release, there were still complaints. In fact, the complaints from players about the map almost completely flipped in nature. Whereas before its launch, players were upset that Wildcard spent so much time developing an unworthy and expensive add-on, in the years following its release, many players took issue with the fact that Wildcard was seemingly neglecting the map and not updating it alongside the rest of the game as the story got more ambitious. The most famous example of this is Wildcard never implementing a fully fledged ending for Scorched Earth. Like I said earlier, Scorched Earth came out while the base game was being prepared for its full release later that same year. With that full release came the implementation of a final boss to the island map. A final challenge to be overcome consisting of a cave full of powerful hostile creatures and a final fight against an AI that has been overseeing your progression. After the fight, you are rewarded with Ascension and get to leave the island, only to be dropped into Scorched Earth, your next challenge as a survivor. Aberration, the next major DLC released after Scorched Earth, also launched with such an ascension already implemented. These cutscenes created a chronological story spanning every paid DLC map. The issue with that is as follows. Since Scorched Earth was released before Ark's full release, it never launched with an ascension, and the developers refused to implement one for Scorched Earth for years after it was announced. This all kind of circles back around to Wildcard's statement mentioned earlier, that the map was meant to be released as a finished product, and Wildcard most likely didn't want to go back to Scorched while they were already busy expanding the story through new DLCs. This upset many fans, as the ascensions from other maps often carry large story significance, and it felt completely out of place to have one of them just missing entirely, especially since from a lore perspective, there is a basis for a Scorched Earth version of the Tech Cave. The last Explorer note from Helena Walker, who visited Scorched Earth before the player, describes a place where it's possible to access Scorched Earth's control room, similar to the island's final fight. Moreover, this location she describes is actually present on the map, yet it is not interactable. However, this means the potential for a Scorched Earth Tech Cave was always there. Despite fans begging and berating Wildcard for years, nothing came of the idea, while Ark's main story eventually wrapped up. But then, something happened that caught a lot of people off guard. What many people thought an impossibility this late into the game's life now seems to be a reality, and in hindsight it makes sense why it would be now. With the main story fully finished, a free DLC having come out recently, and a sequel releasing shortly, now is the perfect time to go back and fix inconsistencies like this. Though I am very happy that we finally got this fixed, I must admit that this is not the perfect solution I would have wanted. Watching this scene unfold the first time, it felt a little bit tacked on, as if the developers put it in just because it was the only thing left to create. Secondly, it seems this scene plays after defeating the Manticore, which clashes with the lore established by the Explorer notes about travelling down to the Colosseum. I reckon it wouldn't have been that difficult to stick a terminal at the Colosseum's pit, and players could offer their Manticore trophies to it, and then the cutscene would play as they fall into the pit and out into space. However, I am glad that we finally have a worthwhile ending to Scorched Earth after so long. With this implementation, the story finally feels complete. So to conclude, Scorched Earth's lifetime has been riddled with complaints, yet it still stands as a beloved map within the community to this day. More recently, it seems most of the complaints have been heard, as the developers have finally fixed what many consider to be the biggest problem with the map. 6 years after its release, Scorched Earth has overcome each and every controversy it found itself in, and now feels like a genuinely worthwhile addition to the story. I'm very glad about this, because as I said before, I love Scorched Earth. It's still my favorite DLC map after all these years. It introduced probably my favorite creature in the entire game.
Oh, look at them! Look at how much damage they're doing.
In addition to many other creatively designed creatures. On top of that, it doesn't stray too far from the original experience of the island, while still giving its own spin on certain aspects of survival. This makes the map just very fun to play on, even though in comparison to other DLC, there might not be as much to do. The map runs very smoothly for the most part and rarely crashes, unlike some other DLC, which is a very important point for me. Scorched Earth embodies everything I love about Ark, a creative spin on the survival genre, while still largely conforming to what people would expect from an open-world survival game. If anything, making this video has made me appreciate Scorched Earth even more, since I now appreciate what it had to go through before its release. Alright, that was it. Thank you for staying until the end, and let me know if you thought this video was well made and any problems that you may have experienced, some points of feedback, whatever it is, tell me. And also I've gotten some other ideas to do a video similar to this. I've kind of started thinking about what I would want a Scorched Earth tech cave to look like. So yeah, if you want me to make a similar video to this, going over that idea, then make sure to let me know. And that's about all I've got. Like I said, I hope you enjoyed, and I also hope to see you in a good mood in the next video. I'm going to go now. Goodbye everyone.